This is Marlins Daily on the Fan Arch Network. I am Kurt Semder, and thanks for being here with us once again as we break down everything going on right now with the Miami Marlins. And we have entered the All-Star break officially, finally. The Home Run Derby taking place last night as one of baseball's young rising stars, Jordan Walker of the Cardinals, taking home the Home Run Derby title, outlasting the hometown favorite Kyle Schwarber to get the big win. Very exciting stuff. Very nice to see. Fun home run derby. Always good to see that happen. And obviously, would have been nice to have one of the hometown Marlins in that, of course. But as we've mentioned many times over this season, home runs not exactly the Marlins' forte this year. So, not a big surprise that that's not what took place in the Derby. But there has been a lot of news around the Marlins over the last couple of days, and I want to get into some of that here today. One of the big things I wanted to talk about was the MLB draft that happened a couple of days ago, and for the Marlins in the draft, the big story coming out of the draft was their first round pick. Miami selecting shortstop Jacob Lombard with their first pick, the 14th pick overall, and this was a big steal for Miami. You're talking about a kid here who was ranked fifth overall by MLB Pipeline, expected to possibly go a little bit higher in this draft and not even be around when the Marlins were picking at 14. But, you know, when you have a guy coming out of high school and there are concerns about whether or not he will sign with a pro team or go to college, that turns into a situation where a lot of teams pass on someone like Lombard, and here's a situation just like that. But he slid down to them, and you have a kid here, a shortstop, who has that major league pedigree. His father, the former major leaguer George Lombard Sr., his brother. Yankee fans recognize the name, I'm sure, in George Lombard Jr. He's their top prospect right now in their system, and from what the scouts seem to be talking about, it seems like Jacob may be even better, and that's what Marlins fans want to hear. That they've got a big line top prospect out of the draft. Born right here in Miami-Dade County in Pinecrest. This is a hometown kid. He said he grew up going to Marlins games, rooting for the team. Went to Gulliver Prep. Well known here in the area for producing big-time baseball talent. He had committed to UM, and he is, as of this recording right now, still committed to UM. But to play at the University of Miami. But one of the things he said was the main reason he committed to the University of Miami was that he wanted that chance to play in front of, his family, to represent his town, represent where he's from. And, he's saying all the right things right now that he's hopefully can now do that at the pro level. And, in order to do that, the Marlins are probably going to have to pay him, out of their draft pool, a large sum. To convince him to not go to college and instead sign with Miami right now and get himself going through the farm system. I think that's probably going to happen. I'm sure that, Peter Bendix and the rest of the front office did their due diligence before making the selection and are confident in their ability to sign him and not lose him to the college game. And that's what you want. You want them to spend that draft money in the right way and go out there and get a big talent. And in this case, a big talent fell right into their laps, right there at the 14th pick in the first round. And it looks like they're going to take advantage of it with a player like Lombard. You look at what scouts have been saying about him. The kind of player who can get you 30 home runs and 30 stolen bases in a season. Saying that he is a wonderful defensive shortstop, just plays excellent defense. They say the same thing you hear about most prospects, got to cut down on the strikeouts, so not a huge red flag and not really a lot of red flags there with him. So everything looks right and looks good, and there's a reason he was ranked as the fifth best draft prospect by Pipeline. But when you kind of take a look at what the pedigree here for shortstops in the Marlins organization, you hope that he can turn into, maybe he turns into an Edgar Renteria, maybe he turns into a Hanley Ramirez, maybe he turns into an Otto Lopez, like we're seeing with them right now. There's a lot of previous success at that position with the team. Maybe he doesn't even play that position. You never know. Right now you've got with the Marlins in the middle of that infield, you've got two players in Otto Lopez who plays shortstop but can play second base, and Xavier Edwards who plays second base but could play center field. A couple years from now, providing that those guys are still on the team and still performing, which is, a big assumption with this organization sometimes. Where does he fit in? I'm sure they'd find a spot if he's putting up big numbers in the minor leagues. So, the Marlins go with a local kid in the first round, and there's a lot of buzz about it. And, you don't get a lot of buzz around first round picks in baseball sometimes, but this one seems to have really sparked some interest in what's going on with this organization. And hopefully Jacob Lombard is able to get it done, and hopefully they sign him and he gets himself right going into the minor league organization and fast tracks himself right through the system, and we'll be seeing him playing at Lone Depot Park before you know it. So solid first pick, and really hoping that it works out well for both the player and the organization here as well. And when you look at the draft and what Miami did here, they really focused the rest of their draft accordingly. When you take a high school player with your first pick, most of the time that means that a lot of your draft pool money is going to have to go to that player to sign them and to convince them, as we mentioned, to not go to college. So the Marlins selected a lot of college players the rest of the draft, specifically with their second and third round picks, a left-handed pitcher in Ethan Kleinschmidt and a right-handed pitcher in Ryan Peterson. They actually selected 13 pitchers altogether in this draft, which I found interesting. You can never have too much pitching, but the Marlins using more than half of their draft to select pitching, and that is definitely the approach that they want to restock the farm system with more arms. We've been talking about a lot of these pitchers that the Marlins have. They traded away some pieces over the last year or two with the hopes that some of their young arms would be starting to make their way into the major leagues. A couple of those players did get hurt so far this season, so that's kind of knocked things down a peg, but pitching is always at a premium, whether you're using these players on your own team, whether you're using these players in trades to acquire what you need at other positions, and we may see a little bit of that at the trade deadline this year. But Miami focusing big time on pitching in the draft, and we'll see if it all pans out well for them. You never go wrong drafting a lefty in your second round, and both of these pitchers, and they took in the second and third round, look like they have some big potential. They were highly ranked coming out of college, and when you draft college pitchers or college players in general, they usually have a faster track to the big leagues as well. So maybe we'll be seeing both Ethan and Ryan sooner rather than later. So we'll see what happens. But it's overall strong draft for the Marlins. We'll see how it all plans out. It's not like some of these other sports where you see the guys immediately. So we'll have to check in on them and see how they're progressing through the minor leagues. And we'll try to keep an eye on how they're doing here on Marlins Daily as they try to make their way to the ballpark right here in South Florida. Now, so, as we talked about, we opened the show, we talked about the home run derby, and we talked about the fact that the Marlins didn't have anybody in there, and it got me thinking, got me wondering. I was just curious, trying to think about some previous big-time home run hitters that the Marlins have had, and, going back through the list, you kind of see some very familiar names who have kind of had big seasons and, here or there. But, going through, I was just looking at the list real quick, and you go to just the top 5 home run hitters in Marlins history. These are names that every Marlins fan should know. I mean, they didn't really surprise me when I saw them. What did stick out to me for some of them was just the fact of what could have been had they been kept here in Miami. The 5th overall, the number 5 with the team with 138 home runs, Miguel Cabrera. We all know the career Miguel Cabrera has and what he was able to achieve once leaving Miami. But he had a wonderful start to his career here, and he is still one of the more revered players in franchise history. 138 home runs, 5th on the all-time list for the short amount of time he played here. Just imagine what he could have done had he stayed. Another player, Mike Lowell, the third baseman. I mean, some huge postseason hits for them, of course. 143 career home runs. He ranks fourth on the list. Marlins fans remembering him well, obviously, like I mentioned, for his postseason heroics, and yet another player that the team traded away. That goes for player number 3, who we talked about earlier here in the show, and that's Hanley Ramirez, just a power speed threat who just dominated when he was here with the Marlins. He, with 148 career home runs, is only surpassed by 2 other players. One of them, his infield mate right there across the middle there in the infield, and that's Dan Uggla. Dan Uggla, famously known as one of those guys who feast or famine hitters. Either hit a home run or struck out most of the time. About 154 home runs has Dan Uggla, second on the all-time list. So I remember him just, short guy, but ton of power, and just used to just crush some long home runs. And you wish he could just, square it up a little bit more and get you some line drives sometimes rather than swinging for the fences. But man, when he connected, it was gone and you knew it. And he is second on the list, and the guy who's in first place is more than 100 home runs ahead of him, and probably the poster child for what could have been. And that's Giancarlo, don't call me Mike Stanton. 267 career home runs for the Marlins, again in a short period of time. When he burst onto the scene, you knew he was something special. He had some injury concerns, but nothing to the degree that he's had later in his career. And Giancarlo Stanton just, played in a couple of different eras here of Marlins baseball. And he was such a talent. You look at what I was saying before with Miguel Cabrera. He really had they decided to pay him and to keep him, such a different direction for the franchise it could have been.